Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Supatease video. And in this one, I am going to be constructing a melee DPS PvP performance tier list as it stands currently on the beta, which of course I would like to double up and say it's the beta. A lot of this is subject to change, but if you're curious where your specialization is currently sitting in terms of performance in 3 versus 3 arena, if you're looking towards Shadowlands, that nice looking gladiator mount coming in for 3v3, or just potentially trying to gun for a rank 1 title, this is going to be the tier list for you. Do note that I have constructed a tier list based on the changes made to the specializations and how fun and engaging I thought they would be for the specialization. So if you're somebody who considers winning as fun and that's all you care about, then you probably care more about this tier list than you're going to be caring about the tier list I made about a spec being fun or not. They don't always directly correlate. Something can be bad and still fun. But again, this is going to be purely based on performance. So let's start off things here. We've got the Arms Warrior. Now, the Arms Warrior is getting a lot of utility return to it with Spell Reflect, Intervene, Mass Spell Reflect, Legendaries. A ton of stuff that was in its old PvP toolkit that made it insane is returning. On top of that, with the Venthyr Covenant Condemn and the Legendaries to increase your Mortal Strike damage, combined with Sharpened Blade, you do a massive metric ton of burst damage. Now, is it comparatively to some of the other melee specs? If you've been watching the beta at all, you know what I'm talking about. We'll get to it when we get to it in the video. No, it doesn't compete. And at the moment, it does have some rage issues. Not because you're stuck in a Frost Nova and you're getting angry. Rage issues because it's hard to use all that extra utility because it is so expensive. So there's a little bit of the downsides, but it is a top performer. And if you remember my fun list, it was also S tier on fun. Unfortunately, here on its performance, it's only going to an A tier. That S tier is reserved for completely bonkers and probably likely to get nerfed before the expansion actually comes out. Now, Assassination Rogue coming up here. This is a specialization that if you played Battle for Azeroth, you knew this was it. This was the spec to be if you were a rogue for the entire expansion. Right now, that might not be the case. Mostly because obviously it directly competes with Outlaw and it directly competes with Subtlety. Now, Outlaw, not a top dog contender at the moment. Subtlety? Oh boy. All right, that's the main thing that's going to be holding Assassination back. It's only really getting Slice and Dice returned to it. However, with conduits that allow your Slice and Dice to heal, it does have a lot of self-sustainability. It's still bringing Vendetta. It's still bringing a ton of damage. And the Serrated Bone Spike, which is good for pretty much all the specializations of Rogue. So Assassination Rogue, in my mind, is still likely to be on the A tier. At the moment in the current standings for beta in terms of power and performance. Now, Enhancement Shaman, this is it's a bit of a disappointment because I was pretty excited about some of the changes, the returning of Maelstrom weapon. I was ready to do it. I was ready to lock in Enhancement Shaman, but the one thing Enhancement Shaman is not good at is surviving. And right now on the beta for Shadowlands, there's a lot of damage. A lot of damage, and the main difficulty is just not falling over immediately. There weren't any honor talents introduced that sort of help alleviate this, neither conduits nor legendaries. So while it can be explosive and do a lot of damage, you're gonna have trouble just staying up in the game. So to me, Enhancement Shaman is gonna be a B. It is a lot of fun. I think it could be fun if there were some additional changes to its survivability, maybe a new honor talent. It would definitely bump the spec up a bit, but it's having troubles competing at the moment just because of that. Now, Feral Druid, it's getting Cyclone back, baseline, on top of its crazy damage and utility. It's getting Heart of the Wild for some nice self-sustainability. If you thought Feral was a good dueling and 1v1 spec before, it's even better now. Feral is looking really good in Shadowlands, especially because some of its counterparts, like Survival Hunter, are also doing really well. Feral Druid, in my mind, it's not completely bonkers. It's not an S tier, but it's definitely an A tier at the moment with all the extra utility, damage, and bonuses to it. It's basically just improving from BFA moving forward. And there's going to be some crazy single target potential with legendaries that enhance your damage if you only have bleeds on one target. It definitely is going to be a strong 3v3 contender, assuming that nothing changes, which is a pretty big assumption, and you know what they say about assumptions. All right, Frost Death Knights. Now this one aesthetically got a lot of attention, right? You got the two-handed versus dual wield. They brought back some of the passives so that you could actually do it. The two-handed one is looking really crunchy, like, oh, you just bite into stuff. Not to mention legendaries and covenants that enable the chill streak playstyle unbelievably. The main problem with the Frost Death Knight and Battle for Azeroth was that you just couldn't get people to stand close. It was like you smelled bad, people just left immediately. Now you can make them stand next to you. You get double Death Grip legendaries, you go to the Necro Lords for the Abomination Limb, pulling targets together, you synergize with other Covenant abilities from other classes in 3v3. There's no doubt in my mind that Frost Death Knight is a strong 3v3 contender at the moment on the Shadowlands beta. Do I think that it's completely ridiculous S-tier quality? No, but it's definitely A-tier. It is easily up there. I see synergies with the Arms Warrior burst damage with it, with the Spear of Bastion, people just never escaping you. It's definitely powerful. Some of the conduits reducing the cooldowns of your powerful defensive cooldowns. It's easily going to be a strong contender, assuming that nothing changes. And the nice part about it is it's one of those specializations that's probably flying under the radar in terms of its strength. So it is one that I think will likely stay where it is when Shadowlands actually comes out. Now, Fury Warrior. Fury Warrior's kind of pissed about Havoc Demon Hunters because Havoc Demon Hunters actually got Mortal Strike before they did, or Mortal Wounds, which is 25% healing reduction when you're attacking a target or applied to a target from one of your abilities. And it still doesn't have it. It's got the rest of the kit that Arms Warriors got, but it lost Thirst for Battle, which was the only thing it had that Arms Warrior didn't have, which was the ability to use Bloodthirst and remove slows to move faster. That was pretty much the only reason to play a Fury Warrior, was to move faster. And that honor talent has mysteriously disappeared. Fury Warrior is not going to compete with Arms Warrior. That's what it's directly competing with. Could you possibly make it work? I'm sure you could, but why would you really want to? It's going to be an uphill battle. Now, to me, Fury Warrior, it's probably going to be C tier. I see that it is so much less desirable than Arms that you're going to have trouble finding groups at the moment. If you really wanted to make it work, you could probably make it work. So it's not a total failure. It's not on the D tier, but it's not up there with the A's. It's not up there with the B's. Some of the stuff being removed from it didn't really make sense. While it's awesome that you get Spell Reflect baseline, you're getting Intervene back. Again, you're directly competing with Arms, which is getting the same thing. And you don't have that Sharpened Blade honor talent to synergize with Condemn to start buffing up with those executes. Your execute doesn't really function the same way as Arms Warrior's execute does. So it's going to be a struggle at the moment for a Fury Warrior. Now, Havoc Demon Hunter. This is a specialization that I was a bit worried about because it was like nerf, 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 nerf. But this thing is like a cockroach. Like you can't, it doesn't matter how many nerfs you hit it with. Like this just doesn't, it refuses to go away. And it's also getting Mortal Wounds from an honor talent on its Fell Rush, which is going to increase its potential to play with spellcasters, which would be a nice change as it's been pretty much playing with melee DPS cleaves for a large portion of Battle for Azeroth, not the whole part. I guess the start I played with the Balanced Druid for a bit there. It was pretty good. But it does have potential to synergize with specs that don't have Mortal Wounds, the Death Knights, the Feral Druids. Maybe we see some of that come into play. It's still really good at surviving, even after the nerfs to Blur and nerfs to its Metamorphosis Leech Healing. It's still got a lot of sustainability. The one thing that it doesn't have, though, is surviving in stuns. It's a specialization that's just always been not so great at that. And right now, the best things in the beta just kill you in stuns almost immediately. So it's not crazy bonkers. It's not an S tier specialization. Thinking about bumping this tier list down, though, a second row, because I wouldn't say it's an A tier. Its damage output is still good. It's still very similar to the kind of face roll gameplay you're expecting for 3v3. Is it an A tier? You know what? I think it is. I think it is. It is an A tier. Havoc's going up here. Even though it got nerf, it's still good. It's got mortal wounds in PvP. Never go wrong with that. It still has massive damage, good mobility. Some of the Covenant abilities are also going to give you insane mobility. I don't see this being a specialization at the moment in the beta as an underperformer. It's definitely not an underperformer. Now, Outlaw Rogue, on the other hand, while there were changes to it to sort of assist it in PvE, where it was already strong in PvE, in PvP, again, it's directly competing with the other specs of Rogue, and I just don't feel like it can. Its damage output is not high enough to compete with something like Assassination Rogue. Its burst windows are a bit short. The only thing you've really got going is a Between the Eyes legendary to get a really big Between the Eyes crit. So you're more or less relying on cheese to be able to work at the moment in 3v3. But the main problem with it is that you just have Assassination and Subtlety that are so much dramatically better. To me, it's a B. Outlaw Rogue at the moment is a B tier. You could make it work, but again, nobody's probably going to invite you because they'd rather have Assassination or Subtlety, and you're just kind of floating in that boat. The kit is really similar to the other specs, and it doesn't do as well. Retribution Paladin. This is one that, with the community, if I give this a high rating, they're going to get really mad because this is a specialization that I also agree lacks mobility. It's not fun to be slowed and rooted, right? I understand. Even though I play a Druid, and maybe I don't actually understand because I can just do whatever I want when it comes to slows. But I am saying that I understand that problem. Does it mean that it's a low ranking on the beta at the moment? No. Red Paladin does a ton of damage. Execution Sentence is half of your health, and they have Final Verdict to make their Templar's Verdict range and does more damage. So they will chunk you. Now, it's not much different than BFA, right? So hold back a little bit. All the Ret Paladins are swarming in here like, you better not give that a high ranking. It's still got the problems of being slowed and kited, but some of this is alleviated by getting some range damage from Final Verdict and Execution Sentence. But it hits like a truck, and it actually is healing quite a lot as well. So it is difficult to not give this specialization a high rating. Now, it's got weaknesses, but the strengths make up for the weaknesses. A problem with it moving into the expansion, although we're ranking them based on the current moment on the beta, right? A problem for it, which I agree, is that 100 burst damage is really noticeable. And that probably gets nerfed, right? So if Ret Paladin loses all of that burst damage that it's got right now, making it good, yeah, then you're just back to the I don't move a lot and I can't do anything, right? So yeah, there is big concern for it, but at the moment, it's an A. Ret Paladin in 3v3 is doing a ton of damage, a ton of healing. It's got good counters to what is really good on the beta as well in terms of dealing with stuns and physical damage with immunities. So it has great synergy in that regard, especially because it's got synergy with the best healer, Disciplined Priest. So Retribution Paladin is an A tier at the moment. There is good concern that if it's what makes it good right now gets nerfed, it's bad. But when we update the tier list as we get closer to the release, we'll adjust that. All right, we'll adjust the ranking. Now this one, if you haven't been watching any Shadowlands content, the Subtlety Rogue, a legendary it currently has interacting with Shadow Strike is making Shadow Strike do an exorbitant amount of damage. And you pretty much only need to know how to press Shadow Strike when you have this legendary equipped, and you will win. You will just win. It is absolutely insane. It has this serrated bone spike, which got nerfed, but is it really nerfed? So basically, it's a permanent dot that's just immediately applied, does a ton of damage, generates combo points. Now, you can remove the dot by healing yourself to full. But if you are unable to heal yourself to full, it lasts indefinitely. So if you're in a 1-versus-1 situation with Subtlety Rogue, good luck, have fun. They're putting that up and running away until you die. But this is 3v3 tier list. But that doesn't change anything. This thing is absolutely insane. It is S tier, unbelievably S tier, above and beyond everything else currently for melee DPS specializations in Shadowlands. This thing is S tier. Subtlety, S for Subtlety tier. It's up there. It is absolutely ridiculous. Now, moving on to Survival Hunter. I was a bit worried about it at first because MM was looking so good, and I saw the complaints about it in PvE, and then some of its interactions with range abilities from weapon swapping was questionable, but it's still performing really well. When I saw a couple of the jungle cleaves in the beta playing with a feral druid, that composition felt really strong. Maybe it's Disciplined Priest carrying it, but even in some of the 2-versus-2 scrims, It had good damage, and it has immunity cooldowns to deal with the high burst damage currently on beta. And it felt like an A tier spec. It's still carrying over from Battle for Azeroth a lot of the good qualities. It's an A tier. Survival Hunter, in my mind, at the moment at the beta, is doing really well. And it's one of those specializations, again, that it's doing well, but not so well that I think that it would get completely crushed, at least for tuning for PvP. Now, they probably tuning it more so around raids, but I feel like Survival Hunter's not also excelling too well there either. So it's a spec that I think is high ranked at the moment in the beta, and it will likely continue to be high ranked. Now, Unholy Death Knight, much like the Frost Death Knight, is having a ton of those synergy things going on with it, right? Like, you pop in that abomination, you're summoning a bunch of ghouls and maguses and all this stuff, right? And you want to keep the target next to that in a big clump. All of the Covenant stuff is coming, the Necro Lords, the legendaries for 2 grips. I mean, you can make sure that people are staying next to your most powerful cooldowns in 3v3. And it is doing a lot of damage. It still has good self-sustainability with Death Strike. It's got some nice conduits that are synergizing with reducing its powerful defensive cooldowns. And in my mind, it's on par with Frost Death Knight. They're both looking like really solid specs for PvP 3v3 at the moment. Is it a Subtlety Rogue? Nope. Do you want to be a Subtlety Rogue? Maybe if you're playing the beta, but I wouldn't want to be in that spot right now because all the eyes are on you, right? Look, it's the only one up there. We've got Unholy DK on A tier. It's looking really good. And the final melee DPS specialization is the Windwalker. Now, this is a specialization that's notorious for mobility. It's getting even more. With a legendary that allows Tiger Palm to charge to a target, you're always going to hit what you want to hit. You're doing a ton of damage, you still have insane mobility, and you have self-sustainability as well. And you can survive these big burst all-in windows that are currently existing on the beta with Touch of Karma and redirect it back at the targets and kind of deal with it that way. Windwalker is really good right now. I'm a bit hesitant to put it on Subtlety Rogue tier because Subtlety Rogue tier is just absolutely crazy at the moment. I am considering altering the tier list down a tier and putting Fury on D and then Enhanced and Outlaw on C and then moving some specializations down to B just based on if I think they'll probably get nerfed more than anything. But at the moment in the current standing, because this is what this tier list is about without taking into consideration my ideas if I think something's going to get nerfed, it's an A. Like, it's not the completely bonkers Subtlety Rogue at the moment, but it is definitely really, really, really good. And if Subtlety Rogue was brought down a tiny bit, and by a tiny bit I mean the legendary that's making it absolutely insane, I don't know if I would necessarily put it up there. But with conduits increasing its self-healing, it heals while it's dancing or it's in stealth through a talent. It has a lot of self-sustainability, a ton of burst, really insane lockdown, and I believe it's going to get access to the poisons as well that Assassination used to have, which was one of the downsides. So it is definitely up there on the S tier. I hope you enjoyed this initial assessment of the Shadowlands beta PvP testing that I've seen from watching streams and from playing myself. I hope it helps you sort of decide whether or not the specialization you're looking into is going to be a worthwhile investment. Just remember, though, that it is a beta. As we progress, I will be updating this tier list. So as of, what is this, September 8th? September 8th. This is the current standings, in my personal opinion, and from watching content creators online. So I hope that it's helpful to you. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Like, comment, and subscribe.